Are you the quantum mechanics?
Yes, we are the Quantum Mechanics, the paranormal podcast for the believers, the doubters, and everybody in between.
We are indeed. Shall we just get straight into the episode today?
Let's just get straight into the episode.
This has come about mainly because of stories I've been getting in the tabloid press over the last few weeks. And it started making me think about prophets and soothsayers.
Ah, yes.
So over the centuries, there have been some extraordinary individuals who've earned the label of a prophet or a soothsayer. Now, I'm not talking about the kind of psychics or clairvoyants you might find at a fair or telling you you're going to meet a dark, handsome stranger. I'm talking about people who have made grand predictions or prophecies predicting major events. If you are a believer, they have correctly predicted events that have impacted our world. But even if you're a skeptic, they are people who are ingrained into our culture.
Okay.
I am going to describe them today as super soothsayers.
The super soothsayers, okay. So the only one that I know about Nostradamus. Mm-hmm. Then there's doubtful things about that. And there's that blind woman in Belgium.
We're going to cover both of those on today's and some others. That's the kind of person that I'm talking about.
Right, okay.
So we're going to look at a number of these intriguing individuals, not just because they are fascinating, but because a number of them from different centuries seem to have made similar predictions relating to this year, 2025.
Oh,
so we're going to look into
that doesn't sound good.
No.
Oh, I was hoping you would go, yeah, they all predicted that everyone would have free candy floss.
Well, looking at the soothsayers, I don't think good news is their stuff and trade.
No, it isn't, is it? No. See, that sort of says like doom porn and doom scrolling has always really been a thing.
Yeah, always, going back for centuries. When we think about the ultimate soothsayer, you've mentioned them already, the name on most people's lips is Nostradamus, who was born Michel de Nostradamus in France in 1503. He studied as a doctor, but he had a keen interest in astrology and the occult as well.
Side note, I have been to his house, which is a museum. Like? Yeah, so they set it up as a museum. It's obviously it's in France. I can't remember where it was, but yeah, it's interesting because you can see like you can go into the room where he did all of his writing and such. Interestingly, the museum shies away from any sort of like, was this accurate or not? He just sort of, it's talking about the man as the star rather than, do you know what I mean? I think that's because
the
people
phenomena rather than the phenomenon.
The phenomena. There are a few bits where they sort of hint at stuff, but I overheard some German tourists who were getting, not irate, but they, you know, well, you might come onto it, the Hitler Hister thing, all of that. But yeah, it's a very interesting, he was not a poor man.
No, I'm sure he did very well. And partly off his 1555 book, Nostradamus published the first edition of the book that shot him into that fame and spotlight. It was titled The Prophecies, or The Centuries. It was written mainly in French with some Latin terms and mythical Greek figures, it says. I think that's drawn rather than actual.
Yeah.
His quatrains, which are basically 4-line poems, were poetic and often cryptic, are believed by many to forecast future events ranging from natural disasters to political upheavals. Throughout his life, Nostradamus gained both admiration and scepticism, with his reputation bolstered by the enduring popularity of his prophecies. His life was marked by a deep interest in astrology, mysticism and the occult, which he combined with his medical knowledge to develop his unique methods of divination. I'm not quite sure how he combined them, but he did.
It was a unique recipe of soothsaying.
But I think you're right in what you were saying earlier, Ben. He was almost a superstar. I mean, he travelled across France and the rest of Europe. He offered counsel to nobles and kings. His predictions continued to attract attention long after his death in 1566.
Yeah, now there's an interesting point about... So he wrote in those quatrains, and so they're very sort of... Some of them are just... They are like, as you say, poems, and they seem quite vague. And I think some latter-day people have interpreted that as, he was worried about being persecuted as a witch. But that doesn't really hold true with how it was when he actually bought them out. Because as you say, he was going around and sort of soothsaying for the good and the great.
Yeah. I think they were probably vague for other reasons.
Yes. I wonder what that reason might be. Yeah.
Well, one devotee of his work has described his writings as a massive verbal jigsaw with anagrams, puns, odd spelling, odd syntax, partial words and inverted words, which have all added to the mystery of his predictions. The book covers multiple centuries laid out in 4-line poems. The content covers many nations with a time frame running from the 16th century to the year 3797.
3797. No, I didn't realise that.
Well, it's funny because going into a lot of his predictions, there's not many where he's actually put an actual date to them. So I think it's an interpretation of how far they go into the future. Was he the greatest prophet in history? Well, according to Steve Bright in his paper, I've been into an academic paper.
Dangerous territory.
Nostradamus, a challenge to the biblical prophecies, which is one of the softer paper titles we've ever covered, I think.
Yeah. It's pronounceable.
He says Nostradamus made contradictory claims regarding the possibility of interpreting his prophecies. He repeatedly stated that future generations, even those antagonistic to him, ultimately would understand the meaning and the truth of his predictions, though they are veiled in obscure language. He says, this is Nostradamus said, for although they are written under a cloud, the meaning will be understood. When the time comes for the removal of ignorance, the events will be cleared up still more. Which is, in itself is even a vague sentence.
Yeah, I was like, because I was listening to you going, and then I was like, what? I don't understand what that means.
Riddle me. A bit like the Kasabian project. The Cassiopeian, sorry.
Cassiopeian project, yes.
Yeah. A bit like this, but sometimes like this.
Yeah, but you're getting warmer.
Yeah.
Now, it feels like a great way of sort of understanding Nostradamus. Now we have AI, might be to have an AI Nostradamus engine.
Well, we might not need one because there is a living Nostradamus who I'm going to come on to.
Oh, okay.
Nostradamus is also acknowledged the possibility of correct interpretations. Most of the prophetic quatrains are so ticklish that there is no making way through them, nor is there any interpretation of them. Back to the sometimes they're prophecies, sometimes they're not.
Yeah.
Now, critics argue that Nostradamus' prophecies are ambiguous and therefore could refer to many persons, places, or events. One of Nostradamus' contemporaries observed, the style of the prophecies is so multiform and nebulous that each may, with a little effort and goodwill, find in them what he seeks.
Yeah. That's what I have always thought about this. Because you kind of go, the great fire from the sky, was that a sun? Is that a nuclear bomb? And some people go, oh no, it was an aeroplane or fire. You can find anything in any year to attribute to something as broad as that.
And the other thing I've realised is both fans and critics of Nostradamus seem to write in his similar style. This guy goes on and says, like airy vapours, they assume as they unroll the figures which the spectre's imagination lends to them.
Yeah, all right, mate.
They can be a bit vague, I think he said.
Yeah.
Even ardent enthusiasts agree that it's possible to find more than one meaning in Nostradamus' prophetic verses. Peter Lemesurier describes them as a massive verbal jigsaw. Moreover, he adds, their language is often obtuse and sometimes positively arcane. The result is that a further layer of impenetrability is added to an already chaotic text. John Hogue admits that his writing is muddled enough to be taken any way one wishes. His ambiguities have kept the controversy of his prophecies alive and even enhanced his status as a seer in the centuries following his death, just as he predicted, apparently.
Yeah. I mean, I do remember that from the museum as sort of, there's a big thing about how he predicted his own death and then how he predicted how he would be perceived in latter years. But I don't know, like, again, you could just say, you know, after I die, everyone will think I'm a great man. And, you know, like, pretty much everyone could say that. I mean, yeah, with few exceptions.
Well, and if you're not, nobody's going to be talking about it.
Well, exactly. That's the thing. It can never be proven either way. Because if you're talking about him, he was a great man. And if you don't know he said that and you've never heard of him, it doesn't matter.
Well, one example that's used in Bright's paper of the kind of ambiguity of verses in Nostradamus' book is this one. Mabus then will soon die. There will come of people and beasts a horrible rout. Then suddenly one will see vengeance. Hundred hands, thirst, hunger, when the comet will run.
Right. Okay, so that is sort of something about when Halley's Comet is here, or Hell Bop, or something like this.
Through use of kind of very loose anagrams, which are anagrams that add letters.
Oh my life.
And various interpretations, that passage is said to refer to the headquarters of the PLO in the 1970s, or it relates to Saddam Hussein, or it relates to a former governor of Mississippi who was the US ambassador to Saudi Arabia, or it's talking about Osama bin Laden, or Yasser Arafat, or George W. Bush.
Yeah.
And no mention of the comet.
Oh, yeah. Well, so, yes, I was going to say, where does the comet come in?
Yeah, it doesn't really.
Right. Okay. Yeah, that's so... But there's a lot of mental gymnastics would have to go into... I mean, I'm sure you can point to how it refers to Yasser Arafat, but I wouldn't hear that. You know, if I went and spoke to Nostradamus and he told me that, I wouldn't come away going, oh, that Yasser Arafat, I better watch out for him.
Yeah.
I'd just go, all right, thanks. I'll see you another time.
Yeah, no, maybe it was George W. Bush. Okay.
Yeah.
Given the poetic style of Nostradamus' predictions, it's not surprising they've been interpreted in many different ways and to fit multiple people and multiple scenarios. Some of his predictions, he was more specific on dates, and most of these predictions didn't seem to come to pass, including that the Roman Church did not persecute astrologers in 1607. A monk from Campania did not become pope in 1609, as Nostradamus predicted, and famine did not nearly destroy the human race in 1732.
Right. Okay.
So in studying, it feels like ones that have specific dates, nothing really came off. It's the ones that can open to loose interpretations. I mean, a more recent prediction, which was for July of 1999, also didn't come true. The prediction was the year 1999, 7th month, from the skies will come a great king of terror to bring back to life the great king of the Mongols, before and after Mars to reign by good luck.
See, I think I heard that one on the run-up to Y2K, and I think I heard some people say, well, that's obviously the IBM bug. Right, yeah. Right, okay. So, I mean, that is there's some obvious interpretations on that. Although King of the Mongols,
yeah.
I mean, I don't know
how Mars comes into it either. No. I guess God of War. This is the problem.
They are delicious.
You go Mars, God of War, or a chocolate bar.
Yeah, yeah. They did get smaller
in 1999.
Yeah, so maybe it was that.
Oh, if it was in the 7th month.
See, that could be an interpretation.
Yeah. Well, still, many believe that Nostradamus was a true soothsayer, claiming he successfully predicted several major historical events. Some of the most commonly cited predictions include the rise of Napoleon and Hitler, that you mentioned earlier, the French Revolution, and the atomic bombing of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. For example, enthusiasts interpret certain lines as foretelling the rise of a great man from the East or a king of terror, which they associate with Hitler. Similarly, some people believe his writings hinted at the chaos of the French Revolution and the falls of the monarchy in Europe. Additionally, supporters claim that Nostradamus predicted the 9/11 attacks, the assassination of John F. Kennedy, and other significant events of the 20th and 21st century. Now, whether Nostradamus was a genuine soothsayer or not, his legacy and prominence continues. Since 1775, at least one book on Nostradamus has been published every 20 years, and since 1840, at least one every decade, which is amazing when you think about it.
It is. It is. Although I wonder if it is like when I was working at the History Channel, and this would be 25 years ago, there was basically, if you have Hitler in the title, people will watch it. That is true. That is why half the programs on the History Channel are Hitler related. I wonder if it's like you bring a book out on Nostradamus, and it's got that same sort of cover appeal, and people go, "Oh, I wonder," there must be something in here for me.
Well, and because it's so ambiguous, his writing, it does lend itself. Here's a new interpretation of his work.
Exactly.
I saw, actually, this is kind of an aside, but I saw Jimmy Kimmel. He sometimes does this little short YouTube thing called Down the Rabbit Hole. I don't know if you've ever seen it.
I have seen clips of it on YouTube, yes.
And he did one, I think, recently about Donald Trump being a time traveller. But it's not the Donald Trump being a time traveller story we all know. He's just found these completely random things like, this gargoyle on a building in Britain looks like Donald Trump. Well, actually, if you take the dates where, it's just such nonsense, but it's very fun.
Oh, wonderful.
Worth a check out. Well, let's move on to the 20th century and a psychic who seemed to have the uncanny ability to predict future events, some relating to this year, 2025. I'm talking about the American psychic Jeane Dixon. She was born in 1904. She initially worked writing horoscopes in newspapers and magazines, but then expanded out to make soothsayer-like predictions with the aid of a crystal ball.
Classic.
I love a crystal ball. As soon as I thought about it and seen the pictures of her, I thought, yes, that's the kind of soothsayer we want.
Yeah.
She published a number of books where she would make her predictions. These included, in her 1971 memoir, A Gift of Prophecy, she revealed there would be a terrorist attack on a New York skyscraper, which many believe relates to the attacks of the Twin Towers on 9/11. In 1956, she predicted that the 1960 presidential election would be won by a Democrat who would be assassinated or die in office.
Right.
Of course, President Kennedy won the 1960 election, and as a Democrat, and he was assassinated in 1963.
Mm-hmm.
Dixon also predicted that Richard Nixon would become the US president in 1968, but would not finish his term in office. Obviously, Watergate meant that it didn't happen either. She also talked of a terror attack which would take place in the summer of 1972. Shortly after this prediction, the Munich massacre took place at the Summer Olympics in Germany in 1972. So, pretty good track record there. She talked about a huge shipping disaster that would take place in 1989. When that year came around, the Exxon Valdez oil tanker ran aground in Alaska, spilling 11 million gallons of crude oil and causing a major ecological disaster.
It's verifiable that she made these predictions public before the events happened.
You're onto something there. Interestingly, and very relevant to today, or at least this year, there are predictions she made in her 1969 book, My Life and Prophecies. They cover the period of the years 2025 to 2037. Should we take a look at some of her predictions about the year 2025 and beyond?
If they're not too terrifying, yes.
They were made 56 years ago.
Okay.
So in 1969, Dixon wrote, "In the year 2025, Red China will have reached an economic and political stability sufficient to forge ahead and become the great conqueror." In that year, Red China will march into Russia, conquer a large part of the USSR's, as it was known then, northern area, and will not stop until it has moved into Finland, Norway, Sweden and Denmark, stopping at the German border. It will not invade Western Europe by that time. However, Russia will also have expanded her direct sphere of influence. It will no longer be limited to the countries of Eastern Europe, but will now include Libya, Ethiopia, Iran and much of Africa. This war of conquest will last from 2025 to 2037.
I mean, there's bits of it in there. I guess if you interpreted it, but China is a great power, which probably wouldn't have seemed like it would be back then. And
well, certainly, I know she was referring to Russia, but between Russia and China, probably more through commerce, maybe commerce and a mix of military. You know, Libya, Ethiopia, Iran, much of Africa. I mean, China is investing and showing great influence in some of those places.
Yeah.
Well, if that prediction of the next few years is filling you with dread, not all her predictions were accurate, so if that gives you any solace. She believed Russia in 1966 would beat the USA to land a man on the moon. I guess if you're a conspiracy theorist,
I was going to say,
might go, she was right. She predicted World War III would break out in 1958.
Goodness.
She said we would have a cure for cancer in 1967. And she also said that the world would end in 2020, which I didn't quite get.
Wait, hang on.
Yeah, no, you're going to pick up on what I picked up on, aren't you? She predicted 2025 being beyond, but said the world was going to end at 2020.
Yeah.
Her followers have pointed out that her prediction of the end of the world in 2020 may have been a reference to the COVID pandemic.
I mean, don't say it's the end of the world, then say there's a pandemic.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, no, what she meant was that it'd be really difficult to book an airline ticket. I mean...
Well, like critics of Nostradamus, Dixon's critics refer to the vagueness of her predictions being open to interpretation. And I did read some who claim that some of her predictions, such as the assassination of JFK, were made shortly after the events occurred. Couldn't find any detail of how that was. I guess what you could say is, hey, I wrote this down and predicted it before it happened. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But, yeah, I mean, if she is for real, a lot of her predictions at least were a bit more specific in terms of times and dates than Nostradamus, and, not so flowery language in terms of interpretation, I guess.
Yeah.
Let's move on to a contemporary soothsayer, one who's been described as the living Nostradamus. Now, his name is Athos Salomé. He's a Brazilian parapsychologist, and he's become the psychic darling of the tabloid press. You may have seen him in articles.
I haven't, no.
If you saw him, I mean, he's got this incredibly distinctive look. He's got these incredibly high cheekbones, massive strong chin. He looks a bit like a plastic surgeon's version of what Barbie's Ken might look like, with a kind of beard. I mean, if he's not had work done, his look is bordering on the paranormal.
Wow, okay.
It's incredible sight. Now, Athos features regularly in the tabloids, giving his predictions. But what I thought I would do, Ben, is, because I read, this kind of kicked this episode off, actually. I saw some of his predictions in a newspaper a couple of weeks ago. But rather than go with that, I thought I'd go back to a year ago and see how his predictions may have stacked up. So I went back to his predictions for 2024. So this is an article by Olivia Burke from ladbible.com, which I'd never heard of. They say, it looks like a few skeptics might owe the man who has been dubbed the living Nostradamus an apology, as he claims that 4 of his predictions for 2024 have already come true. And seen as though we still have a few months left to go, so remember this was in mid-2024, Athos's predictions, he reckons he's still on track for a clean sweep. But the Brazilian parapsychologist, who claims to have correctly predicted 2020's global coronavirus pandemic, he's another one who's said to have done that, predicted the death of the Queen in 2022. He's growing a bit bored of people doubting his alleged psychic abilities. So let's see how he did with his 7 predictions for the year 2024, shall we? Well, he predicted a coronal mass ejection from the sun in April of that year. So kind of tick, but I guess coronal ejections from the sun are quite big. He described it as a solar eclipse, which I'm not sure it really was. He claims he predicted British King Charles' cancer diagnosis, though when I checked it out, it was quite a vague prediction. This is what it said. We will find out if he remains in power between 2024 and 2025, he said of our 75-year-old king. So that's been interpreted of, this cancer diagnosis was his prediction of whether he'll remain in power or not.
I mean,
but you're predicting
so
the health
vague.
of a 75-year-old man, right?
Well, no, all he said was, we will find out if he will stay in power. That could mean anything. That could mean he was going to hand over to his son, or...
Yeah.
No, I'm not buying that one.
He predicted the start of World War III, triggered by an event in China, or a cyber attack between China and Russia. It's quite vague, the start of World War III. Debatable. He warned of the dangers of AI and CCTV. I guess you don't need to be a psychic for that one, do you?
Not really.
This one's interesting. He described secret experiments that would be taking place on humans using AI to contact the dead.
Oh.
Yeah.
I'd like to know about that one.
Yeah. I mean, again, pretty hard to prove that, I guess, but it's an interesting concept. So again, Ben, it's a mixture of predictions that could be interpreted in different ways, or conspiracies that are hard to prove either way, right?
Yeah, and I don't know. Again, there's a lot of willingness on behalf of the audience to buy into this.
Yeah, to believe. Yeah, like you're saying, death scrolling in a way.
Yeah, and if I walked into a room and I went, shh, everybody, I've got to tell you, we're going to find out next year if the king's going to carry on being the king. And you heard it here first. You'd be like, all right, do you want another wine?
I want a few predictions that are a bit more
specific.
Jean Marshall from Reading is going to find those keys down the back of the sofa that she's been looking for 3 years.
Exactly. Yes, and all of the people that I have spoken to or I sort of investigate who... would have they would say they had genuine psychic abilities. They do try to be very specific. They would say, it's your grandfather's watch, and he's left it in the cupboard upstairs next to the shelf, and that's where you'll find his watch.
Yeah.
And there's a million stories where that is actually the case. But then on the other side, people go, well, you could just guess that he'd put his watch in a cupboard upstairs, so you can't really win. But I do think you do have to be specific, and I know that...
Well, it's a bit like for every 10 unfound watches, there might be one that is found there. Do you know what I mean? Possibly.
Yeah. But I think, the psychics that we know, I think if they said something that vague, I think they would go, well, I wouldn't, I'm not very confident on that, but here's something you can take to the bank.
Yeah. Well, there have been some prominent British soothsayers, probably the most famous being Mother Shipton. Have you heard of Mother Shipton?
I have heard of Mother Shipton, yeah.
Now, her true identity is uncertain, but many believe her real name...
She was a mother, and she was the surname Shipton.
Well,
I know it wasn't that.
They believe her real name was Ursula Southill, and that she was born in Yorkshire in 1488.
Yes. Okay, yes.
I mean, the description of her is interesting. She was described as a hunchback woman with a crooked nose, a bit kind of witch-like in a way.
A great beauty.
Her prophecies are recorded in a selection of verses, I guess in a similar style to that of Nostradamus's, called Mother Shipton's Prophecies. They were published after her death in the 17th and 18th century.
I guess she would have been much more careful to have not been accused of being a witch.
Well, it's interesting, that description of her. We'll come back to that in a minute. It is claimed she prophesied the Great Fire of London in 1666. Some classics here: the rise of Napoleon and Hitler. I like this one: the invention of submarines and of the aeroplane.
Okay.
And at the end of the world would happen in this century, which seems to be a given for anybody who's a super soothsayer, doesn't it? You've got to give a date for the end of the world.
I think that's what they teach you in soothsayer school. As long as you make it after you're dead, it's fine.
She did make some predictions for 2025, or this rough time period, let's say. Should we have a look at what these are?
Free candy floss.
She said men would be riding through hills and walking underwater.
I mean, that's not specific to this year.
There would be houses of glass.
Greenhouses, cool.
And iron floating in water. I think
boats.
People have used that as boats. Yeah.
That's not specific to this year, though.
No. There would be a unification of England and France, which some have suggested relates to the Eurotunnel. But
yeah. Of course they would.
And there would be war between the North and the South, but she didn't say what North and what South. So I don't know if that was Britain or if that was the world.
Korea.
Now, I was going back to her look because there is some debate as to whether Mother Shipton actually existed.
Ah.
Now, some folklore experts suggest the legend and name were used by publishers to make a few quid selling made-up books passing off as genuine prophecies.
Now that I can buy.
Which comes back to the description of her almost witch-like.
Ah, I see. She becomes a caricature.
Yes.
Right.
Because these books were published after her alleged death.
Right. And is there a fabulous story about how they came to find the manuscript?
No, I haven't come across that. I mean, maybe that's part... I was thinking that. Is it almost a lost video footage, kind of lost manuscript thing? I don't know. Possibly. I don't know. There are these incredible prophecies, and a bit like Nostradamus, I guess if you can create a character, it doesn't have to be real for these prophecies to sell, as long as you create the right backstory, as you're suggesting.
Yeah. I mean, that caricature of a woman looking like that, that's very Eye of Newt and Tongue of Beetle and sort of children's fairy tale type of witch.
Yes. So, Ben, in my research, I started researching another couple of super soothsayers, but I got a bit sidetracked because I came across an article that features 4 super soothsayers and their predictions that are being related to 2025 because it seems like they've all made the similar predictions for this year.
Okay. I mean, they're going to be doom, aren't they? They're not going to be happy.
Well,
yeah.
So the article was published in May of this year in the Economic Times. It says 4 well-known psychics, Baba Vanga, who you mentioned.
Oh, yeah.
Nostradamus, who we mentioned, Athos Salomé, who we mentioned, and Nicholas Aujula have all issued ominous predictions for 2025, warning of widespread turmoil. Baba Vanga foresaw powerful earthquakes driven by climate change and a European war signalling the beginning of humanity's downfall. Nostradamus, in his book, predicted a brutal conflict involving the UK, with both internal unrest and external threat, alongside the return of deadly COVID-like pandemic.
Oh, fun.
Athos Salomé and Nicholas Aujula echoed these concerns, pointing to potential global upheaval. These aligned forecasts have sparked worldwide anxiety and debate over what the remaining of this year might bring. Born in 1911, Baba Vanga became known as the Nostradamus of the Balkans for her uncanny predictions, which reportedly included events like 9/11, again, the death of Princess Diana, and more recently, climate change relating to earthquakes in 2025.
Although I do prefer earthquakes.
I prefer earthquakes too. These were similar to the devastating tremors that struck Myanmar and Thailand in April of this year. So people are making connections with that.
Is that caused by climate change, though?
I don't know. Yeah.
As I always say, I'm not a scientist. I don't know how climate change causes an earthquake.
Yeah.
I mean, drying earth, I don't know. I'm not going to speculate, but okay.
Alongside her predictions for shattering earthquakes due to the climate crisis this year, which has already come true in Myanmar and Thailand, Baba Vanga has also forecast that Europe would be rocked by a devastating war. The prophet, who was born in 1911, this is her, I'm glad she changed her name, as Vangalia Pandivu Gushtarova, had predicted the war as the start of humanity's downfall that will devastate the population.
Well, I guess we know what that is.
Meanwhile, Nostradamus warned in his book Les Prophesies, a collection of 942 poetic...
Went to school with him. Les.
Texts, that this year the UK was going to be drawn into a war. Again, so much open to interpretation. In the book, which first appeared in 1555, he said, "When those from the lands of Europe see England set up her throne behind her flanks, there will be cruel wars." Another psychic who was named after the French astrologer, but is still alive today, Athos Salomé, the guy we mentioned earlier, 38-year-olds from Brazil. They always put ages, don't they?
Yeah.
Who's been dubbed the living Nostradamus, also predicted a coming war. The Brazilian psychic, dubbed the modern-day Nostradamus for his accurate predictions, such as the event of Queen Elizabeth's death and the COVID-19 pandemic.
There's a lot of irony there, yes.
Has issued a chilling warning. World War III is near, and the worst is yet to come. In December 2024, he predicted that a global conflict was imminent, pointing to a rising geopolitical instability and the growing role of cyber warfare. This isn't just a war of men, he claimed, but a war of machines. The question is, what comes next? Echoing his concerns, London-based hypnotherapist and psychic Nicholas Aujula, also 38, forecast that 2025 will be marked by a troubling lack of compassion and a surge in violence fueled by religion and nationalism. He believes World War III could erupt by mid-year, with the UK no longer immune to its reach. These follow warnings following aggressive rhetoric from Russian officials after a car bomb killed Lieutenant General Yaroslav Moskalik in Moscow, an attack that the Kremlin blamed on Ukraine. Russian propagandists turned their fury towards Britain. They accused British intelligence of supplying explosives for the assassination, with state TV pundits calling for violent retaliation. There we have, if you go with it, 4 psychics from different centuries, many of them, predicting basically World War III in the next year. But, so here's my thought on all this. I mean, war is always on the horizon, right?
Yeah.
You know, we could have gone Gulf War, we could have gone the war in Ukraine, we could have gone the terror attack. You know what I mean? It's not like the world has these huge, centuries of peace. There's a war going on somewhere that you can take these verses and say it's either the start of the war or there is something going on here, and you can make it fit, right?
There is, yeah, absolutely. And I think there's an online site. Well, I guess he's not online, but you can access him via his website. There's a guy who runs a site called Worldwide Predictions, and he puts up what he thinks is going to happen around very specific events. But he says that he can't see sometimes the time frame for them. So he sort of revisits stuff. But then, before the election, he said, Kamala Harris is definitely going to win. Stake my reputation on it almost. Yeah. And then they lose, and he's like, oh, yeah, sorry about that. It
was a bad day.
It was a bad day, yeah. That's not to do him down. I think I'm sure he's probably very confident in his beliefs. But it's very difficult to, for some people making these huge claims about worldwide events, it seems like you're just playing a lottery system. You're not advising Janice Smith about what's going to happen to her in the next 10 years on the dating scene, which has to be a lot more specific. And the fact that these people are often quoted in the newspaper, it seems to me to be, it's a way of selling books and articles.
And clicks.
Yeah.
Well, I think that's borne out by another thing I thought about with that last article. It feels like having one soothsayer is probably not enough anymore. You've got to go with the narrative of, hey, these 4, Nostradamus, the new Nostradamus, they've all come up with the same thing. Well, as we've seen going through the Nostradamus ones and the other predictions by those 4, they're vague enough that they don't all say 2025. Do you know what I mean? You can write a clickbait article that suggests, hey, 4 of them do all agree, but they don't really, do they?
Not really, no.
I mean, I was expecting the predictions to be more specific in terms of the dates and the consequences.
Yeah.
I don't know. There feels like the premonition... Yeah, what was going through my mind was it almost feels like cold reading on a grand scale.
Yes.
You know what I mean?
Yes.
Yeah, there's going to be a war soon. Yeah, there is. But you don't need to be a psychic to predict that. There will be.
When Baba is quoted, it's usually in places like the Daily Express.
Yeah.
Because they know if it's a slow news week, it's a great way of increasing clicks.
Yeah.
Because you can write an article which says, some people believe that this means.
Yeah.
It's like when we interviewed, I'm trying to remember his name now, the lovely fellow who was telling us about his article about the werewolves in Birmingham Live.
Yes, yeah.
And he said, it's a great source of news because no one's ever going to come in and say they didn't see a werewolf. There is no...
and the werewolf's not going to complain to the press complaint.
Exactly. Yeah. And it really feels like that.
Yeah.
I'm reminded that there was that like back in the 1990s, early 2000s, you were probably familiar with Jonathan Caner, the astrologer.
Yeah.
And he, at one time, had the largest computer server network outside of like MSN or something like that. I was working at Sky at the time, and someone told me this because he made his money by sending those those horoscopes to newspapers internationally in multiple languages on a daily basis. And there's only one way you can do that, which is to have a computer system churning them out. And now I'm not saying he didn't write them all, but at the same time, you get the implication. So,
well, it's funny because I worked on a show and we commissioned Russell Grant.
Oh yes,
to do some horoscopes for us. I won't talk about it on here, but I'll talk about it on the Extra Scoop because that was very funny.
Okay.
I'll come back to that. So I've got one more thing to come, because I started to feel disappointed, to be honest, after researching this episode. Yeah. I don't know if you remember a while back when I covered the book, The Premonition Bureau.
Yes.
Which is a fascinating book. And if you've not read it, go and read it. If you've not listened to the podcast we did on it, go and listen to it because it's incredible. And, they found that most people didn't have this ability, but they came across one or two people who could predict, they believed, future disasters or future events.
Yeah.
And after that episode, I came away going, wow, there is something in this. Researching this one has probably knocked my belief back to more of a skeptic point of view because they are so vague and they're so open to interpretation and showmanship, I guess. But one thing that did restore my belief, and I want to close with a super soothsayer that isn't human.
Is going to be a dog, a horse, or an octopus?
Well, this might give you another clue. Some people may claim they are alien in origin.
It's an octopus.
It's an octopus. I'm talking about Paul the octopus, who many of you might remember. Do you remember Paul the octopus?
Is he the one that did the football?
He is. Now, Paul the psychic octopus became one of the most famous animal predictors in recent history, capturing global attention during the 2010 FIFA World Cup, which was held in South Africa. He was a common octopus. That's not an insult. That was just his specification.
Specification.
He resided at the Oberhausen Sea Life Centre in Germany. He gained overnight fame for his uncanny ability to correctly predict the outcome of football, soccer, if you're listening in the States, soccer matches during Germany's matches and the 2010 tournament final. His predictions were made by selecting between two boxes containing the flag of the competing teams. The box he chose was the one he predicted would win the match. His consistent accuracy led to widespread media coverage and made him an international sensation. Paul's predictions during the 2010 World Cup seemed almost supernatural, with many fans and media outlets marvelling at his abilities. He correctly forecast the results of Germany's matches and most notably the final between Spain and the Netherlands. In the final, Paul chose the Spanish flag and Spain did indeed win the tournament, further cementing his reputation. His success sparked a wave of interest in animal predictions and prompted discussions about animal intelligence and intuition. Despite widespread speculation, scientists and skeptics argued that Paul's predictions were likely the result of chance or simple cues from his handlers.
But we will never know because he was served up in an olive oil dressing.
Well, it's funny you say that. His fame extended beyond the World Cup. He became a pop cultural icon, appearing in television shows, documentaries, and had his own merchandise range. His popularity highlighted the fascination with animal intuition and the idea that animals might possess some form of psychic ability. Sadly, Ben, Paul died in October of 2020, shortly after the World Cup. His death was widely mourned by fans. His legacy endures as a symbol of the intriguing and mysterious ways animals can sometimes seem to predict human events. This is amazing. During the 2010 World Cup, Paul the Octopus had a 100% success rate, picking the winner of all of the 8 games he was tasked to predict, which is a 256 to 1 chance by luck alone.
I mean, that is quite impressive. That is impressive.
I mean, I guess I was thinking about it, if his handlers did have some way of setting up cues for him, that could, I mean, if Germany is facing, I don't know, San Marino, you're pretty sure that Germany is going to win. So his handler might push him in that direction. And they're pretty smart creatures, octopuses, as we well know.
Yeah.
If it was just purely on luck or psychic power, it's quite a feat. 8 out of 8.
Yes. Well, that's very good. I give Nostradamus 4 psychic octopuses out of 8 for his predictions.
Paul gets the full gamut.
He does.
Yeah.
Is it, how after we started talking about octopuses, you said you're not going to eat them anymore, and I said, I'm with you.
Yeah.
I read a piece in the paper last week. So the warm waters, the warming waters around Britain are bringing in more octopuses, and they're making money for fishermen. So down in Brixham, I believe the year before last, they landed 200 kilograms of octopus on one day. This year in one day, 148 tons.
Wow.
So it's becoming like quite a thing in British waters.
Quite a food.
Yeah. Which is sad because, as you say, I now won't eat it in restaurants, but yeah.
Yeah, and it shows a success. I think there's similar things with squid, aren't there? Squid populations are just going crazy.
I'm not giving up my calamari rings.
I don't think they're as smart as octopuses, but they're...
No.
But yeah, there's something about that type. What they called? There's a name. What they
Cephalopods.
Cephalopods, that's it. Cephalopods, pretty successful creatures.
Yeah.
Such soft-shelled animals. Soft-skinned, yeah. Well, I don't know where I've left with this. I came away going, these are just great show people. I mean, I'm not saying they don't believe what they're saying, but,
I think you're probably right. I think that they are the equivalent of a snake oil salesman, but the snake oil is a prediction.
The future.
Of the future. And it also, I think... it denigrates people who do have a skill in its own right, and also there are sort of some deeply concerning things about perhaps how maybe where Nostradamus was getting his information from. We've spoken about dark entities before. I do think one has to consider that side of things
because
before
there is
embracing
interest in
these
the
things.
occult as well.
Yeah, exactly, and. There's a potential for automatic writing, and that doesn't always come from a good place. And I don't think it's a coincidence that all of the predictions that come from these people, the majority, are of doom and danger, because that is what demons like to do. And again, that makes me sound crazy. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying if you were going to put 2 pieces of the paranormal puzzle together, those are 2 that I think fit.
Yeah, definitely. Well, like I said, I've probably come across quite skeptic today, but it's not how I felt after reading and covering the Premonitions Bureau. So, check out the book or the podcast that we did. I think that episode's called The Premonitions Bureau and Me, if you want to do a search. Excellent. Okay, well, we're going to jump on to our Patreon exclusive episode now. Ben and Peter's Extra Scoop. So if you want to become a Patreon to support us and get extra content, come and join us at patreon.com/TQM pod.
That would be lovely if you did so. Thank you very much.
We'll see you next time.
Okay, take care.
Bye.
Bye.
Are you the quantum mechanics?